reminder for those who don't know, we're not just a podcast. We are a medical device recruiting firm and we fill positions nationally. There's not one state I know of where we have not made placements. Visit chasemedsearch.com to find our latest position listings. You can also find me, Jordan Chase, on LinkedIn, and I post up-to-date position listings there. I'm capped at 30,000 LinkedIn connections, so you can follow me on LinkedIn, but unfortunately, I can't accept your invitation if you send me one. Finally, if you've got feedback on our podcast, please email it to me at jordan@chasemedsearch.com. I love suggestions for topics for the show. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe on YouTube. It does help grow the show. Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch podcast. I'm excited to have my next guest on, Richard Bridgewater III. He is currently an area manager for Abiomed in Las Vegas, and he holds both a bachelor's and master's degree from New Mexico Highlands University. Who is Richard Bridgewater? We're going to find out. Welcome, Richard, to the podcast. How are you?
Doing well, Jordan. How you doing, sir?
Great, man. Great to have you on. We were talking in the warm-up a little bit about the fact that we've worked together in the past. And so on my family's behalf, I thank you for being an outstanding interview candidate and doing awesome once you got the job.
Hey, I couldn't be more appreciative. I enter every space with gratitude, and I can't thank you enough, Jordan. And I think, obviously, knowing you for some time now, I think
Yeah.
it's been an awesome relationship. And so I just can't thank you enough for the opportunities that you brought my way and kept me abreast as to what's going on in the world of med device.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You tore it up when we got you over to Vertiflex a few years ago, and you've just continued to build on that. We're going to find out more about that, but let's talk about early foundations. You have 2 degrees from New Mexico Highlands University. Are you from New Mexico? Are you originally a native of there?
No, not at all. Originally a native of Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
and
Mhm.
uh, and New Mexico again was just an opportunity found, stumbled upon an opportunity. And Jordan, I tell you, going there gave me some autonomy early on to get some independence from my parents, but also gave me the ability to lead at an early age. And so, a ton of leadership roles that I held there as a young student, I think helped me get to where I am today. And so, I couldn't be more appreciative of that place. It's called Las Vegas, New Mexico, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the first Las Vegas.
First law, the
If you,
original. Okay, got
yeah,
it.
it's the original Las Vegas. And so, yeah, no, just a ton of cool experiences culturally, from being an early leader, having some really good managers and bosses there at New Mexico Highlands, as I did some graduate work there as well, graduate assistant on the women's basketball team. That was probably one of the toughest bosses I've ever had. But we could talk about that later.
That's great. That is phenomenal. Our son is a student manager for the basketball team at SMU in
Oh,
Dallas,
nice.
and he loves it. And it's been a great experience for him. So that would be fun to talk about. But I want to talk about. So you graduated, and then you got into medical device sales. How did you get into medical device sales? Was that always a career goal of yours, or did you stumble into it?
Yeah, not at all. I tell people all the time that growing up, I had no idea that this was even an option, right? So I think once I finished coaching college basketball, I was like, man, what do I do? I knew I was going to go back to Dallas. And believe it or not, I became a branch manager at Hertz in downtown Dallas. I did that for 14 months. And I tell you, it was probably some of the best coaching and experiences that I've gained to date when it comes to just the fundamentals of selling, the fundamental of being a professional, and the fundamentals of getting up and going and getting it. So I'm forever indebted to that place. It taught me a lot of lessons, long nights, if you will.
Yeah. You don't know how much I love that answer because for years I've told people it is an exceptional training ground to get a job like that. What were you doing at Hertz? What were they training you on? What was that life like? Take us through the day to day of first job out of college working for Hertz.
Yeah, I think. what people should understand is that within your career, you're going to have great bosses, great managers. Then you're going to have
Mhm.
some that aren't so good. Fortunately, I was able to observe and know that the manager I had, it wasn't something that I wanted to duplicate. And so in that, I was able to be promoted fairly quickly. But
Mhm.
within the manager program or the manager training program, I mean, you learn the initial um, sides of selling, right? So how do you go out there and scale the market? You know, how do you build your business? How do you follow up? So just the basics of selling, I think, is where you learn that at Hertz. Enterprise too, right? All of these rental car places, um, ADP, any of these entry level sales positions, I think you can leverage transferable skill sets, and which I was able to do. Luckily, with a ton of coaching and mentorship, I was able to leverage that getting into that device. So to answer your initial question, I didn't know what the next steps would be,
Mhm.
but I knew that I had a passion for impact, and that's what struck up a conversation one day with a lady that walked into Hertz and said, "You don't belong here," and so the rest is history.
Well, you didn't because you were number one out of 300. I think I saw on your resume, three-time Central Regional Performer. You know, for young people out there listening to this that want to get into their first sales job and kill it, and then be recognized, hey, you don't belong here, by someone that can further their career. What advice do you have for them to getting in and just really tearing it up the way you did?
Yeah, simple. Be where your feet are. Be where your feet are. Yeah, it's cool to have
Mm.
tons of aspirations, but you really have to dig into the lessons that need to be learned in the space that you're in. I think I always tell in every interview that I do or every interview that I host that there's a direct line to why we sit here today. And so my line is sitting in front of you, Jordan, today. I think the beginning of that line was at Hertz, right? And it's so vitally important of your journey, right? And 11 years later, I'm so happy to tell the story and continue to tell the story of how I started there. I'm proud of it. In fact, I keep it on my resume, right?
Hmm.
Even though I have 10 years of med device experience, I still keep it on my resume. One, to remind myself of the humble beginnings, but two, just don't forget where you started, and don't forget the fundamentals of what selling is, right? It's being a consultant. It's being a problem solver, and it's helping people find solutions.
And it's hard to overstate how much hiring managers and recruiters love to see that foundational experience at the bottom of your resume, something like that, where a job, it's a job where you just got to grind it out sometimes and put in the sweat equity, as they say.
Yeah, I think grind is an understatement there at Hertz, to say the least.
Dallas in the
I
summer. Yeah.
Oh man, tell me about it.
So this woman that spotted you and said, "You don't belong here. You're destined for greater things," and that's not to knock Hertz at all. But who was she? How did she identify you, and what happened next?
Yeah, Robin Davis is a multiple President's Club winner, pharmaceutical representative out of the Dallas, Texas area. Phenomenal rep. I know that now because her and her husband are really good friends of mine over the past 10 years. But she was one of my demanding customers, if you will.
Yeah.
And none of my staff could really handle the demand she had. And so, being who I am, I stepped up, demonstrating how we handle those types of customers. And in that, she was so impressed with the interaction. Long story short, she plugged me into the National Sales Network, and
Mm.
luckily, Medtronic was starting a pilot program that's now like 10 years old. But I was the first of the pilot, if you will, to start that program along with six other individuals. Diversifying the pool of candidates that they bring in at the entry level, and seeing
Hmm.
if we could fend for ourselves with some coaching, with some training, but just having a diverse background, right?
Hmm.
Uh, she recognized talent in me. She saw that I could be coached, and she immediately plugged me in right away. And so for me, when you talk about who Richard is, that's who I am. Is paying
Mm.
it forward, right? Being able to lift as I climb and helping others, crack into a space that I had no idea existed. And so my wife and I, we're really big on, I mean, we take phone calls every week, right? And
Yeah,
trying to help people crack into the space because we know how important that is. And Robin Davis, I call her my guardian angel because she definitely uh, changed the trajectory of my life and career for sure.
yeah. National Sales Network is an absolutely fantastic organization, doing work that is so important, and their career fair is absolutely fantastic.
Second to none.
I try to make it as many years as I can. It's in Vegas this year, I think, right?
Yeah, in fact, it's right across the street.
It'll be great.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it'll be the
yeah,
first time on the West Coast, so I think it's going to be record-breaking numbers, and I
yeah,
think a ton of companies are going to tap in for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So, what was the program or what was the job that you were hired in at Medtronic to do? What was that like? And tell us about the transition from being a business to business rep and moving into now this new world of medical. What was the job? What were they asking you to do?
Yeah, night and day, right? Night and day. So, not having any experience, it was a sales and leadership training program that essentially, uh, this is what companies are doing nowadays to build a bench, if you will. And so I was lucky enough to be able to step into this role and thrive. But it encompassed a lot of studying, a
Hmm.
lot of field out in the field work with tenured reps.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like I was back in graduate school because I was I was reading, doing a ton of practicums, going back to the headquarters in Boston, and then popping back out into the field. So it was strenuous. It was something that they told us it would be. Um, and I'll be honest, I don't think people had the expectation that, we would fare as well. But I still have buddies that when we talk about it to
Hmm.
this day, when we came in, they're still at Medtronic. They're still they're still working. So essentially, what she
Yeah.
wanted to do is get through that training piece, which was anywhere from 18 to 36 months. Yeah, 36 months. And it was in the world of cardiac rhythm and management. So ICDs,
Mhm.
pacemakers, cardiology, electrophysiology. So in doing that, it was
Yeah.
a wonderful starting ground when you talk about going and working for one of the bigger med device companies in the world and one of the tougher disciplines, if you will, within that device. And
Mhm.
so definitely was appreciative of that training ground for sure and set the stage.
Yeah. Other guests we've had on have talked about levels and what are the new expectations or what was this new role or being in medical device demanding of you that
Yeah.
hadn't been demanded before? You had the foundational piece down, but was it more intense? What was different? What was the biggest difference you'd say for you?
Yeah, I think you had life and death in your hands, right? So working at Hertz, yeah, you got yelled at and things of that nature, but it was nothing like this, right? Where not only did you have to learn a portfolio of devices, but then you also had to learn a disease state, right? And so, in learning that disease states, how do you connect the dots? So that's not even you're not even touching, the sales piece, right? Developing referral pipelines, uh, calling on the market, developing growth, and things of that in that nature, right? Like so, it was a lot to take in, right? I was drinking from a fire hose for about a year, 18 months. But I think one thing that I think is important that people should know is that you just have to dive in and get after it and let the chips fall where they may. Having the aptitude to learn was important,
Yeah.
and being very, very hungry and navigating and tapping in with as many people that was doing well as you possibly can.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What surprised you the most, do you think, about the job
I think,
initially when you got the first job?
again, this was my first med device job. And so the amount of dependency, if you will, that the physicians have on these individuals to help them provide solutions for their patients.
Mm.
and you quickly realize how serious this is.
Hmm.
Not only are you affecting that doctor's practice, but you're affecting an entire community. And in that moment, in that time at Medtronic, is where I really developed an affinity for being in the med device space because it's so much bigger than your paycheck and that space that you're in. It's so much bigger than your little role. Not to diminish it, but it's. I mean, you're combating against the status quo, and you're trying to help people, um, you know, uh, obtain healthcare. You're a part of that continuum now, and so for me, I just did. I
Yeah.
thought it was the doctor, nurse, and the patient. You just didn't have any idea, especially 10, 11 years ago. I didn't know that reps were a huge part of that continuum, and how we give our best to our patients.
You went through three roles at Medtronic, where you started initially in kind of
Yeah.
area service, and then a clinical specialist role,
Hmm.
and then territory manager role, right? Can you kind of talk about maybe just a little bit of the difference between each one of those as you
Yeah.
move through? I mean, we know what a territory manager is, most of us, but
Mhm.
what it takes. You could have gotten stuck along the way in a clinical specialist role. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Many people make that
Yeah.
choice or that decision, but you were able to keep
So
elevating.
first and foremost, I just want to send a large sentiment of gratitude to those people who helped me navigate and navigate those spaces, right? Um, and they helped me to
Hmm.
realize, okay, one, identify what you want to do. There's some people that want to be clinical specialists forever. They like the role. For me, I knew I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a sales leader. And so the initial role was the one in which we were training up under kind of area sales and service associate. And so it was an associate role, right? Um, you weren't really on a team, right? You were just kind of bouncing around. But within that time, I really developed a name for myself. How did I do that? I didn't know as much as anybody else, but I just hustled. I always raised my hand. So all over Texas, if
Yeah.
they needed me to go help out, cover a clinic, I raised my hand, and I got the name RB3. That's when people was like, "Hey, RB3 will come cover it for you," right? And so in that,
It's sort of
yeah,
quarterback,
right.
one letter difference that
And
we all
so
know,
and so just developing a
right?
reputation
Uh-huh.
of what your brand will be is something that I did early on at Medtronic. Um, and while doing that,
Hmm.
I was always taught to network, but now I was taught to internally network. So I want to be sure that everybody at Medtronic, when we went to our sales meetings, they knew who I was, knew where I was, and what I was trying to do. And in that fared for me well. A couple years later, I wanted to be the first off the bench. I didn't want to wait till the 36 month period of our training. I was like, let me get out there and do something. So that afforded me an opportunity to actually come to Las Vegas, become a clinical specialist, where they were in dire need of reps to come out. And, Vegas is a tough place
Hmm.
to out of anybody. It's hard to place quality reps here. What I saw as a pathway to
Hmm.
be promoted. If they're having a hard time replacing reps and or getting reps in Vegas, I said my bags are packed. I'll go. And so, long
Hmm.
story short, got to Vegas, and every 2 years, I was able to either get promoted, move, or find a better opportunity. And so, the difference, clinical specialist, obviously you are the clinical expert. You're covering cases. You are that resource to the physician and the nurses to be sure that they're educated on our devices. Sales rep, not only are you or the territory manager, you're expected to cover those cases in some instances, but you got to move the needle. You got to sell. Um, what people don't really talk about is the leadership of those TMs. There's a ton of people on your team, whether it be internal people or external people that you have to, figure out how do you find synergies to develop amongst your space and market to move the needle forward, pulling everybody in the same direction. And so, as a territory manager, you really become a consultant, a leader in multiple spaces, in addition to building those relationships with your customers. So, um, I think it's some of the sharpest people I know are territory managers. They just have a lot on their plate. They have a lot of plates to spin, as what we
Hmm.
call it. and keep them spinning, right? Growth is the name of the game. So
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, there's so many nuggets there about what makes someone stand out, what differentiates an average performer from a top elite level performer. Um, have you, I mean, how long did it take before you were turning around and mentoring other people in the field?
yeah,
How long have you been there before?
Jordan, I'll be honest with you. The moment I got the opportunity at Medtronic as an associate, I stepped up as one of the leaders of that group and said, "Hey guys, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
put myself out there to see if I can get a job before our training is up." And then I'll report back. I'll report back to you guys on what I'm finding out. What do these managers really want? Yeah, you got to understand as an associate, you're competing against internal candidates that's been there for
Yeah.
decades that want that job, right? You compete against other people that may want to switch from a for competitive company that have maybe some relationships. So for me, I started at an early at the beginning of my career. I just felt like it was so important, but it was also that's how I'm built. That's within my ethos is I have to. That's where my enjoyment comes from. That's I want to live a purpose-filled life of impact,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one way I'm able to do that is by mentoring others. And so my phone is always open.
Yeah. You know, that's just such a that crystallizes so much about you, Richard. Where does that come from with you? Where did that? When did that start? What age did that start? Everybody wants to be a leader, but very few people know what it looks like. You're putting yourself out there and saying to the rest of the group, "Hey, I'm going to be the first, and I'll be the guinea pig, so to speak.
Yeah,
I will report back on what I'm finding about what they want."
yeah,
That's very uncommon. That's not a normal trait or behavior. Most people want to keep their head
yeah.
down and not stand out too much. When did that start with you, or where does that come from?
Those examples right in my household growing up as a kid from my dad, right? Just such a selfless guy and just
Mm-hmm.
always achieve the overall mission. I'll tell you a funny story is when I was playing Little League football, and I was always like everybody's a standout in Little League football, but I would always, the coach would always, call me out. And one day I asked my dad, like, why is he always calling me out? He's like, well, in all these spaces, you're not gonna have a choice. You're a natural leader. You always rise to the occasion. And so I always kept that in
Mm.
mind because in every space that I've ever been in, even when I was trying to stay back and kind of just keep my head down, there was always opportunity and or scenarios that call for me to step up and get us on the right track. And so now I've just embraced it.
Mm-hmm.
I've just leaned into it, knowing that I have the ability to, leadership is just the ability to have people follow you, right? Whether you're doing bad or good, it's that's the
Yeah.
simple definition of leadership.
Yeah.
And so and knowing that I've
Yeah.
just leaned into it, Jordan, and now I've embraced it and now I want to enhance it
Mm-hmm.
however I can.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about an exciting new resource that I've discovered for new college grads and for healthcare professionals that want to break into pharmaceutical sales. upharmasales.com. That's the letter U for UPharma. For years, I've thought there's a gap that exists between new college grads that want to break into healthcare sales right away and the ability to do it. But upharmasales.com fills in that gap. At UPharma Sales, you'll find insider tips on landing your first role, nailing the interview, and building confidence for this field, all from experienced reps who've been in your shoes. Ryan Conseso built the website, and he outlines the very steps he took to break into pharma sales. Pharma sales is competitive, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Set yourself apart. Go to upharmasales.com and start your journey the right way. For a discount on the online learning program, use the code CHASEMedSearch. Now go get after it. So you're at Medtronic. You've grown your career. Uh, you learned a very difficult technological aspect of medical devices. I mean, it's the most serious, right? In many ways, it's pacemakers. How hard was it to learn that and get it down and develop mastery of that? Most people, people go to pacemakers. for that. There is
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
pacemaker school, I think, in South
Yeah,
Carolina
ATI is what
for
it's
that.
called, and or WebMD, right? So up in Boston. To your point, yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
the senior reps, like you guys are set these guys up to fail, right? If we're being honest and transparent, right? You got a guy, yeah, he's talented, but he's coming out of a space. One, he's never been in med device, any type of healthcare. He's smart, but come on, guys, this is and so in that I leaned in
Yeah.
and I accepted the challenge. So you talk about long nights of studying, being in as many cases as I possibly can, and just really leaning into the education of it, really trying to understand, seeking to understand, and
Hmm.
you know, I'm forever grateful for that team in Fort Worth, Texas, that allowed me to kind of be in their back pockets every day, pull me into cases,
Yeah.
let me run with them on sales calls to see how do you connect the dots between the technological piece and the disease state, and then where the doctor wants to go in his desired state as a physician. So I, I, I lie. I'd be lying if I said that I did it all on my own. You really have to have a team around you, leaders uh, that's willing to and has the appetite to teach. And I was just lucky enough to have a phenomenal
Hmm.
team. Chris Hickman, he was at my wedding um, last year. You know what I mean? Just every day, every day he would just when he had time, we would step aside and go over just some X's and O's chalk talk, I would call it, as a sports analogy. And so I'm forever grateful for that team
Yeah.
who definitely took me under their wing.
Hmm.
And I think that's what it takes, honestly. You can't do it on your own. You can read as many books as you can, but if you're not navigating,
Hmm.
the teams appropriately, the resources, the people, the leadership, you know, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, asking questions, you just, especially in that space, you just will not get it if you don't have the experience. But it can be done.
Yeah. I was going to ask if there were some that didn't make it out of the program, if there were any.
No.
I don't want to know names, but I'm curious, were there common themes there about if somebody didn't make it? Uh, what could you tell people in this podcast? These are things you shouldn't do. You should avoid these kinds of things because they don't lead to
Yeah.
success in a job like that and to getting where you
Yeah. Number
where
one,
you want to go.
isolation. Uh, you have to
Mm.
embrace um, the different resources and people, as I alluded to earlier, that's willing to help you. You can't
Hmm.
singularly do any of this. And so I think don't go on a silo and thinking that you're going to excel. You may get by here and there, but at the end of the day, you're gonna need some additional help. I think you can't cheat the game, right? The game will give, especially in this space, it will give you back what you put into it. And so if you know that
Hmm.
I'm done with school, I'm done with learning new things. I highly encourage you to really have some self-awareness and know that this may not be something that you want, that you really want. You like the idea, but really
Hmm.
dig into, and understand. I think that's important. Understanding what's going to be asked of you um, from the early on stages of learning to then once you do learn, what the expectation
Hmm.
is. It's going to evolve, and so I think having some self awareness and being truthful to yourself. One of my most impactful managers that I've ever had. I would always come to him with a scenario, and he would always tell me like, "Just be honest." That was always his. Especially if you're asking yourself, like, "Be
Okay.
honest, tell the truth."
Yeah.
You know what I mean, and then go from there. And that served me well. As hard as
Hmm.
that has been sometimes, but it definitely
Yeah.
has helped. So those are a couple things.
That's great. So you make it to the territory manager position at Medtronic in Las Vegas, in the
Mhm.
CRDM division, right? I think it was called at the time. How long were you in that role, and what was that like? Did you feel like you just had arrived? Did you feel like I'm holding on to this by my fingernails? What
Yeah.
did it feel like to have that and get? Tell us the day they told you they want you to have that job or they're
What
promoting you. What'd that feel like?
I felt, I felt overwhelmed. I'll be honest. I was excited,
Mm,
um, but I was hungrier than ever because typically,
yeah.
and I think this is important for people to know, especially in coveted jobs like that and in these big metropolis cities like a Dallas, people just don't leave those jobs every day. And so I had to leave
Right.
Dallas to find a role that was open. So I wasn't really the rep in Las Vegas. I was the rep outside of Las Vegas and all the rural areas surrounding Vegas. And so when you talk about
Sure.
an underperforming territory, um, I was slightly overwhelmed initially, but I was so hungry to prove myself right,
Hmm.
that I could do it. And that was those couple years was some of the better performances that I've had to date. And it was I didn't know
Yeah.
everything, but it was just off of sheer grit and hustle, driving tons of miles a
Hmm.
month to go get after it. And so if I didn't know anything else, I knew hustle.
And succeeded wildly. We don't need to go through the numbers, but they were very strong. And one day you get, I don't know, how did it happen? You got a call about a company
Yeah.
called Vertiflex and a job. I
Yes.
mean,
So this is where this
what
kind of
happened?
cadence started, like so every 2 years I was either getting promoted or like moving on to this additional role. And right at the 2 year mark, I get a call from Vertiflex, a new technology that's looking to blaze the trail in pain management and orthopedic surgery. And I'm like, okay. And so at that time, I felt like it was a 5 year mark overall in Medtronic. And I was really seeking leadership. I really wanted to get into a space that would give me the room to grow, to lead. So in my mind, and
Hmm.
going back to some of the people that I really listened to, changing of discipline, having different areas of expertise, it may play well for you in the future.
Hmm.
And so I really ran with that and the technology that Vertiflex had presented. I was very, very intrigued, not only by the technology and how we can help and affect patients, but also to the ability to then have something and call it my own, build it from the ground up, develop it so much so to where I can bring people on to work alongside me. That really intrigued me the most. And because I knew what I had, begin start with the end in mind. I knew that I wanted to lead. And so I thought Vertiflex at that time was going to give me the opportunity to do that. And in that experience, I met some of the best leaders I've ever had the privilege to work for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Reese is one of them. Uh, sure. Yeah. Well, I know when I talked to you on the phone, the minute I talked to you on the phone, I said, "This guy, he's got it. We gotta get him in front of people ASAP." And it was magic, man. A theme in your career is growth. I mean, you were rookie of the year, watch list at Medtronic, revenue growth, 20+%, like everywhere, 36% physician utilization growth. And now at Abiomed, you're doing it again. You know, some people maintain business and grow modestly. Some people grow very consistently. How do you do it? What is, let us peek behind the curtain here a little bit. How do you drive these kinds of growth numbers and percentages consistently throughout your career? Is there a formula to it? What do you think about it? How do you think about sales growth in medical territories?
I think first and foremost, yeah,
Did you?
it is different, but I think
Hmm.
first and foremost, you have to understand that that's the name of the game, is growth. And
Yeah,
s- and so,
it is.
you know, um,
Yeah.
I think growth happens simply because you focus on it. I was lucky enough to, in a lot of situations, to where there were underperforming territories, and then I was able to step in and have some growth. And the tougher part is when you start to grow and you start to really capture the market. How do you continue to grow year over year? Which I'm running into that right now at Abiomed.
Hmm.
But I think just identifying where you got to be, kind of setting out kind of your plan of action and saying, oh, this is the amount of cases, revenue that I have to. So you have to be very, very clear on what growth looks like. Defining it, maybe it
Mm-hmm.
has to be defined by the people that are judging you and measuring how good you are. And then you have to align that with, what your goals are. So I think that's important. It's just being very, very clear on what growth looks like, and then doing all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like a reverse engineering of the growth number that you want to hit. Again, I've had the privilege of being led by some really, really uh, good leaders that had
Mm-hmm.
clear growth goals. And for me, I think when
Yep.
you see it on paper, you see it on the scoreboard, I think it makes it obtainable. And I've been a part of high growth companies, high growth disease states, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's
Oh,
the overall expectation was to grow like a Vertiflex. At Abiomed,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
we were expected to grow faster than most med device companies, being kind of in its infancy stages, almost like a startup, right? So I think it's been a combination of those two things, right? Being clear about what growth looks like and defining it, but also too, if you're a part of a growth company and the expectations for everybody to grow, you don't want to be the one that's not growing. So
Absolutely. I like how you said that. You've been part of hiring processes where you got hired, and then I'm sure you've been on the other side of the desk where you're interviewing people as well that want to either break into medical or they have some experience, and now they want to go to where you are. What would you say makes interview candidates stand out to you when you're sitting down with someone and they've got their paper in front of you and there's a job and you're either being asked, is this someone you want to have as a coworker, or you're being brought in to a process where they might be added to somebody else's team, but they want your insight.
mhm.
How can candidates stand out to you in that situation? Who's memorable to you? What can they do?
Yeah, I have to say, and it goes back to one interview, my first interview I ever had with Chris Reese, absolutely bombed it.
Yeah.
But it was a great uh,
Mm-hmm.
learning space, and he allowed me to grow in that moment. But being able to tell your story, articulate it
Yeah.
well, uh, and identify because of your story and your journey of why you sit in front of me today, right? What that allows me to do is one, I want to be intrigued. Yes, I'm looking at your resume. You have a pretty good resume. Why? That's why you sit in front of me. But also, two, it gives me some insight and foreshadowing, like how you would present to customers. That's essentially what it is. Can I trust this individual based on his history, based on her ability to captivate an audience, follow through? You know, uh, can I see them in front of our customer? And
Mm-hmm.
and if not right now, what's that gap look like? I like them a little bit, but how much of a gap do we have to close? That's what I look for
Mm-hmm.
initially, right off the bat, right? Is that. Um, and then secondly is authenticity. I want somebody, um, not necessarily like me, right? I love
Yeah.
going and finding people that bring a different perspective to our team. Um, I think in that just makes your team stronger. I don't want somebody who's, strong in a certain area that I am that makes me feel comfortable. I actually like somebody that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable in terms of, oh, I need to get better, right? Somebody that's going to be able to uh lift the performance of the team by way of what they're doing, just being themselves. So just being authentically them, and being able to lift the people around them by way of how they work, the type of human they are, and I'm doing it all while being authentic. I think are two things that I really look for, um,
Mm-hmm.
when we're recruiting to bring people to our team.
Yeah. No, that's so helpful. Newcomers coming in to sit down in front of you for an interview, if you could coach somebody or somebody came to you and said, hey, I've got something coming up. Trends, changes in the industry changes all the time. I get this question all the time. What should people be paying attention to right now that's affecting, from your perspective, medical devices? And maybe when they come in for an interview, have some core competence in it or some knowledge about it. there anything happening out there that you've got your eye on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the implementation of AI into um, care pathways and how
Yeah.
we are helping and enhancing healthcare, I think is something that you
Hmm.
just can't ignore. Um, and this is an old tactic, but I think I'm seeing more so people being asked to present. Like they send you a deck and they say, "Hey, come to the table ready to present on this disease state, present on this." And so I think
Mm.
for entry level positions, right? I think a lot of the people that's been asking to help them lately. I had a guy I just interviewed with Intuitive, with Striker,
Yeah.
and I know they've done this for
Hmm.
years, but I think they're really honing in on this and seeing how people can, again, can we pitch you in front of a customer? Uh,
Hmm.
and so I think where people mess up is they go in thinking they're going to be the field expert in this stuff, and instead of just kind of hitting the high level points, showing
Hmm.
the ability to be able to get through a meeting and or a sales pitch. So that's something that I really coach to these days, but also having an awareness of I don't want to say be selective of the jobs that you're going after, but you really need to be aware and educated on the jobs that may not be here in the long run. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's for me. I'm even looking into that. Right? What does that look like 10 years from now? As I hope to get into uh, upper leadership.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I read something about them pioneering the use of robots in surgery, surgical
Oh yeah,
robots, completely AI driven, right? That's
yeah,
a that's and they apparently had some good success. I have no idea the complexity of the procedure. I don't know, some of that, but that made me think that would really shift a lot of things if things move that way toward completely, robotic driven surgeons.
yeah.
Not just surgeons behind the robot, but the robot actually doing the surgery. So a lot in the future coming up fast, and I'm sure you'll be on top of all of it, Richard. I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun, and it's just stellar to hear about your career. Maybe to close out, what's next for you? What are you thinking about? I know you're thinking about growing your territory. That's established.
Yeah, I think here in the city of Las Vegas, where we're fighting every day to help our cardiovascular patients. Heart health is the main plague of a ton of heartache and grief of a lot of patients and families. And so for us,
Mm-hmm.
Vegas is an area that we definitely want to grow. And so we, my team, myself, we're locked in to building up Vegas and the surrounding areas here at Abiomed. We just recently got acquired by Johnson& Johnson a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so developing what we call heart recovery, and where patients can recover their entire hearts is something that I'm very, very embedded in and definitely want to continue to go down this pathway. It's a full circle moment for me, actually. I started in the cardiovascular space, stepped
Mm-hmm.
out a bit, and now I'm back into the cardiovascular space. And so um, fun times ahead, a ton of runway for us. I'm excited to grow our team, excited to continue to help patients.
Absolutely. I have no doubt you'll do all of those things, Richard. You helped a lot of people today. Thanks for being on. I appreciate it. I'd love to have you back.
Jordan, you're the man. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely.